Hey everyone, Amy Bowser-Tennant here, the Genealogy Reporter, and it is Family Story Friday. That's where I share stories from my own history or yours. If you have a story you'd like to share with me, I'd love to hear it. Just send me an email, which is in the details below. The email address, that is. All right, so today I'd like to share another story from my Big Grandma series. If you're familiar with the blog as well as our last couple of weeks of Family Story Friday, I did share a story about Big Grandma. Now, Big Grandma is my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother. She was raised in the hollers of Virginia, and so to me, she was pretty much the most unique person I'd ever met. And I would think that possibly my sisters and my even cousins would agree she was special. And though she did some pretty crazy things, she was a wonderful grandma, my absolute favorite grandma. So today's story is entitled, Hell Hath No Fury Like a Woman Scorned. You know it's going to be a good one. Let me read to you from the book. We've all heard the saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but that is actually an adaptation of the original line. Playwright William Congreve actually wrote, Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman scorned. Now, I've already told you, Big Grandma didn't get mad, she often got even. So this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to you, dear reader. Apparently, Big Grandma found out that Grandpa had been helping that old widow woman. Now, I'm going to translate that for you. That's that old widow woman, okay? Widow woman. She wasn't going to have it. Grandpa had been hauling wood for the woman with his mule. They used the mule and horses for just about everything well into the 1950s. Total side note, when my grandfather died, Grandma moved the family up to Ohio. And my mom was about 11, 12 at that time. And it was about 1958. And she was maybe 59. And she was in social studies class. And the teacher was saying that back in the old days, they used a horse and plow to plow their fields. So my mom raised her hand and said, my dad used a horse and plow just last year. She was accused of lying. Oh, hi-oh, people. Anyway, Big Grandma told Grandpa that he had better stop helping that woman if he knowed what was good for him. But he didn't. She caught him doing it again. I'm sure she was jealous of that woman, but more importantly, as my own mom speculates, she was probably upset that he was willing to help that woman and not help her with all the work she had to do. I agree. Sometimes husbands want to help others and not quite as anxious to help at home. Okay, back to the story. That evening, the mule was making awful noises. Hee-haw, hee-haw. Okay, I can't make a nice mule noise, thank goodness. And Big Grandma went to the door and she hollered out to the yard, You can hee-haw all you want, because tomorrow you ain't gonna be here. The next morning, Grandpa went out to the pen. The mule was dead as a doornail. He came back to the house. Mammy? He called her Mammy. You know what happened to the mule? He's died. Big Grandma denied having anything to do with it. But please, the man had been married to her for quite some time. She came that way. I'm pretty sure he knew exactly what happened to that mule. It was arsenic. It was arsenic, my friends, that happened to that mule. Big Grandma loved that story so much that it even influenced a grandchild who shall not be named, but she knows who she is. Grandma poisoned the mule. I guess that goes to show you, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. After all, she did tell him not to help that old widow woman. Now, I continue with the story about some very special things about Big Grandma. Big Grandma wasn't all bad. I will tell you some wonderful stories of her kindness, love, and work ethic that may soften your feelings towards her. My favorite memory of Big Grandma's love is when we were sick. She would baby us something crazy, make us our favorite salty, runny eggs, pet our heads when we had a fever, just like she would the cats, or hold us on her lap, and she smelled like old tobacco, because She dipped snuff. Loved her snuff. One time when I was a kid, I had what she was calling trench mouth. Now, looking back on it, I wonder if it was hand, foot, and mouth. I don't think so, though, because I only had the blisters in my mouth, and I had had strep throat right before. So I'm guessing it was either from a really high fever that I had these blisters, or perhaps some sort of a yeast infection from the high antibiotics they were giving me for strep throat. But that's just a thought. I had blisters all over the inside and outside of my mouth, and they were so painful that I couldn't eat. The doctor had given me some medicine, but nothing was working. I was at her house spending the night, and she hollered at me to come in the kitchen. "Let Grandma fix something for you to get rid of those blisters," she said, and she reached into her white metal cabinets and pulled out a brown paper bag. Out of the bag, she pulled out a dirty old tree rot. At least that's what I thought it looked like. "Golden root," she said. She cut off part of the root, washed it, and then wrapped it in a towel. Then she took a hammer and pounded it into a fine powder. Putting a little warm water into the bowl, she mixed that powder in to make a type of wash. She used a clean white cloth and swabbed it all over the inside of my mouth and told me to spit out the excess and not to swallow it. The whole time I was thinking, does my mom know you're doing this? But I was too afraid to say anything to her, to suggest that I might not trust her. The wash was so bitter, and it really made me feel like I had a cotton mouth. But the next morning, every blister was gone. Prior to moving to Ohio, one of the ways Big Grandma made money for the family was to search the mountains for herbs and roots with medicinal properties and sell them. She may not have been the most educated in the way of schooling, but she was one of the smartest women I ever knew. Oh, by the way, did you know that half-chewed chewing tobacco stuffed in the ear canal will cure an earache? She had lots of interesting medicinal traditions, but you know what? They worked. Another couple I remember hearing her talk about, or possibly my mom and her sisters, I've heard them mention this several times. A giant tobacco leaf, one whole leaf, which are really big. I think you had to soak it, but I'm not sure. And if you laid it on a person's stomach and they had intestinal worms, it would help pass the worms. Another one I heard about, I didn't hear about. This is one I actually saw with my own eyes. Grandma had terrible teeth, okay? She didn't have the first 4 teeth here on either up or down. She only had her back teeth until very much later in her life when my mother finally convinced her to get dentures. But she would often have a toothache, and so she would gargle and wash her mouth out with isopropyl alcohol. I remember thinking, oh, I don't think you're supposed to put that in your mouth, Grandma, but that's how she did. And then another time I remember we, all us girls, complained of leg cramps, growing pains, and she would go to the little cabinet off to behind the kitchen table and pull out this giant bottle. And I remember it smelled funny, but she would rub our legs with horse liniment. It worked. I don't know what to tell you. Horse liniment works for growing pains. Or maybe it was just the massage or the fact that we were being babied. I don't know. Either way, Grandma had a special way of healing all our wounds and ailments. She was quite good about that. I've had a really good time talking with you today on Family Story Friday. I hope you tune in next time for some more stories. Also, I need your help. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Join us also for Genealogy Tip Tuesday and Genealogy Thoughts Thursday. Looking forward to seeing you again. Have a great week. Bye-bye.